steam, honey, and a password. I measure desire in millimeters and voltage. That's the honest truth of my job. I design kitchens that make people feel like better versions of themselves. Under-cabinet lighting hides the dark, induction glass turns a fingertip into fire, and a downdraft whispers away the smell of whatever you shouldn't admit you're cooking. Give me a blueprint, and I'll give you a room where secrets evaporate like steam. My wife, Anya, used to say my hands smelled like cedar and citrine, the wood and the cleaner, after a day in the shop. She'd rub her cheek against my palm and laugh, and it did something to my ribs every time. We were 10 years in and still reaching for each other in the morning like it was a reflex, like the toothbrush and the kettle. I thought that counted. I thought the counting mattered. Then her calendar started to move around like a cat behind a curtain. Classes ran late at the studio. Meetings appeared where there used to be dinner. A new perfume the color of pomegranate folded itself into her hair, and under it, sometimes, a trace of a cologne that wasn't mine, something dark that pretended to be cedar and didn't quite pull it off. We still touched, but the touches were efficient. A brush of knuckles in the hallway, her chin on my shoulder while I tightened a hinge, my mouth on her wrist in passing. I could feel air collecting in the spaces between those moments like dust. I told myself it was the season. Spring is a liar, promising everything at once. Clients wanted their penthouse islands done before summer, and I took the work like a man with a mortgage and a pride that dressed itself as productivity. The job that filled my evenings belonged to a couple with a view that made the river look tame. They asked for matte black cabinets, a slab of veined stone the color of lightning, and a cooktop that swallowed smoke right where it began. I slid my hand over the glass and felt the familiar hum. Heat under glass is the whole trick, power you can see but not stare into. I recommended a model I'd installed in a dozen places, silent, sleek, the kind of thing that lets you sear a confession and nobody will smell it. The week I templated their countertops, our joint card flagged a charge I didn't recognize. Velvet and Vine, XX, XX, the line read, a time that wasn't business and a name that wasn't a restaurant we knew. When I searched, I found a photograph of a velvet curtain and a caption about bespoke cocktails in a hidden room. I closed the browser and opened a drawer for a measuring tape I didn't need. It made a sound when it snapped back that the room mistook for a sigh. I didn't say anything. I measured. I ran a bead of silicone so clean it looked like good luck. I tightened a bracket until the metal sang. At home, I stirred a sauce just a little too long, watched it thicken past perfect and blamed the heat. 2 nights later, I set down my sander and took the train to Velvet and Vine. The bookstore that hid it wore its disguise proudly, gold-stamped classics in the window and a bell above the door that decided how worthy you were. A woman in an emerald dress slid a copy of the Magus out of the shelf, and the wall swung a fraction. I followed because some doors exist to be walked through. Inside, lamps threw the kind of dim that forgives. A jazz trio was practicing sincerity in the corner. I was halfway to the bar when my eyes learned a new trick, how to find my wife in a room that didn't belong to us. She was there, at a table set too low to be modest, her fingers painting circles into the condensation of a glass. Across from her, a man with one of those magnetic watches and a jaw that got its own compliments leaned in like a question mark with money. He laughed. His hand tapped the table twice, like a code for the bartender. It slid across the wood and stopped close enough to her wrist to be called a decision. Anya tipped her head back to laugh. The soft in that gesture was mine, I thought. But the light on her throat and the pulse the glass caught, none of it belonged to anything I could claim. I waited for the shame or the rage, and what came was something quieter and worse. A click, like a cabinet finally leveling after months of not quite closing right. I left before the trio reached their bridge. I stood in the alley and breathed in the smell of the city and cherries and a cologne I did not own. Back home, the cooktop's glass showed me my face while the kettle creaked toward boil. I pressed my thumb to the touch slider as if heat could answer anything. I poured water over tea leaves and watched them swell like secrets. The next morning, the door to the shop opened on a sound like a polite throat clearing. "You're Julian?" she asked. "Usually," I said, "if my coffee behaves." She laughed, stepping in with a case that promised a camera and secrets of its own. Her name was Sierra. She shot interiors for the magazines that made clients circle islands with the hunger of teenagers. The matte black penthouse couple wanted their kitchen documented in stages for the brand. Sierra shook my hand, then looked past me at the banks of drawers and clamps and the slab of stone waiting like a sleeping animal. She walked the room, eyes taking measurements I couldn't see. When she stopped by the cooktop, her reflection trembled in the glass and held. Something in my chest did a very small, very definite thing. "Let me guess," she said. "You prefer wood to steel, but you like glass for the way it doesn't argue when it's clean." "I prefer things that tell me what they want if I listen long enough," I said. "Then we're in the same business." She shot the skeleton of the kitchen making itself out of boxes, the cabinet faces leaning like men at a bar, the way a coil of cable refused to stay coiled. As she moved, the air learned her perfume and gave it back slower, something like oranges after rain. Around noon she asked if there was a place nearby for lunch. I told her I could make something right there that would embarrass anything we could order, and it was true. The cooktop hummed under my palm. I sliced fennel thin enough to read through, warmed oil until it said please, and kissed garlic with heat until the room got honest. Sierra hopped up onto the counter, long skirt, flats that made no sound, knees catching the light, and watched as if watching was an occupation we'd both forgotten was vital. "What's the trick?" she asked. "With fennel, patience." I stirred. The fragrance rose like a rumor we hadn't decided whether to believe. With most things, actually. We ate standing, our shoulders almost touching, mouths hot with citrus and pepper. She offered me a fig she pulled from a paper bag. I bit. She laughed. Juice slicked my lip. She reached without thinking, thumb grazing my skin, and once the touch happened, we both needed a second to tidy the air. Sierra lowered her hand to the counter and let it rest there, near mine, the warmth of it an admission we weren't going to notarize yet. "Your ring," she said softly, glancing at my hand. Not a question. "Still fits," I said, "for now." She nodded once, the kind of nod that says both I hear you and I am not a solution you'll use to avoid what you owe yourself. Professionalism is a posture. Kindness is a muscle. She seemed to have both. We worked until the light decided to go make someone else look better. When she left, she stood in the doorway as if measuring the distance between us was part of the job. "Tomorrow?" she asked. "Tomorrow," I said, and I wasn't talking only about cabinets. Anya came home late. Her hair smelled like pomegranate and something not quite cedar. She set her bag down and kissed my cheek, the way strangers do if they're in a play. "Long day," she said. "Clients, crisis." "Everyone has one," I said. She smiled, that PR smile that made bad news feel like an anecdote. "You're good at keeping us steady, you know that." "Am I?" It slipped out before I could dull the edge. She flinched, then covered it with a joke and a question about dinner. "I cooked. I always cook when words threaten to fail at their job." The next afternoon, Sierra showed up with a small jar of honey and a cable release. "Bribe," she said, "and precision." She was filming time lapses of the island going from skeleton to skin, and she wanted to see the whole thing, the quiet tremors and the silences, stitched together like proof that attention is the closest thing we have to love at work. Between takes, we stood too near the cooktop because heat does what it wants. We didn't talk about rings or bars with curtains or cologne that lied about being cedar. We talked about the sound a drawer makes the first time it learns its rails, the way a touch can teach an object its purpose. When she bent to adjust a tripod leg, her shoulder brushed my arm. The brush lingered because sometimes physics takes instruction from feeling. She looked up. I shouldn't tell you that my mouth learned her name without my permission. I shouldn't tell you that the room went softer on purpose. But I will tell you the truth I can admit on camera. When she leaned in and kissed me, it was the kind of kiss that edits the scene without losing any footage. There was nothing graphic in it. There didn't need to be. Hands on faces, breath fumbled then found, a near smile broken by a better decision. When she pulled back, she rested her forehead to mine just once, like clinking glasses in a dark place where you don't want to draw attention. "We're not careful people, are we?" she whispered. I thought of millimeters and voltage. "We're precise," I said. "Be precise with me, then." We were. I won't describe more than the way a back arches when trust clocks in, or how laughter happens in the middle of a kiss and makes the whole thing better, or the way her fingers trembled exactly once when I touched a line of skin that looked like it had waited all day to be named. We closed the shop door and let the city pretend it had the whole story. The rest is ours, and safe for any audience. That night I slept alone on the sofa. Anya had a meeting at 9 she needed to be bright for, and I didn't want to negotiate the choreography of forgiveness. Around 2, my phone lit the room with a message I wasn't brave enough to call a sign. It was from a number I didn't know. Velvet and Vine, Wednesday, 8:15. The password is sundial. Wear the bracelet. No signature. No mercy. I could have pretended misfire. I could have deleted. Instead, I screenshot and sent it to myself, the way you lay a tool on a bench where you won't forget it's sharp. In the morning, I made coffee so strong it argued, and I wrote a note that said everything honest and none of the cruelty. "We're lost in calling it busy. I won't follow you into a room where my name is a password you don't say out loud." I left it on the cutting board where she leaves her keys. When I came home that night, the bracelet, the one I'd made from a thin strip of ebony under silver, was sitting on top of my note like punctuation. We didn't explode. We unwound. Anya slept at her sister, with a suitcase that looked like it resented being filled in a hurry. My mother called to say that marriages have seasons. I told her gardens, too, and sometimes you pull up a plant and realize you should have let it be wild. She hummed in that way that means she loves me even when she thinks I'm being dramatic. The magazine wanted a human element in the final shoot. Sierra suggested a cooking scene, hands, steam, the intimacy of concentration. We shot it after hours, with the city becoming evening outside and the island shining like a piano. She filmed me slicing ripe peaches and shaving curls of Parmigiano that curled up like quotation marks. She reached into the frame with her own hand, dipped a spoon into the honey, and held it above my wrist. It fell slow, her thumb followed, catching the spill and pressing it gently into my skin. There's nothing obscene about a thumb pressed to a wrist, but it can be the cleanest line in the sketch of a life. "Look here," she said, and I did, into the lens, into the suggestion of a future that could be lit like this all the time. When the camera stopped, we didn't. Not in ways that would ever embarrass the work, or the room, or the version of ourselves we would need to wake up next to. We moved with the kind of care that makes the word careful retire. When the feature came out, the kitchen looked like a promise the city had decided to keep. The editor loved the way the steam rose and vanished, called it a choreography of appetite restrained. People messaged the shop to ask whose hands those were, and I laughed, because anonymity had never felt so specific. I signed papers in a small office with a plant that didn't get enough light. Anya looked tired and expensive. We divided the life like a pie. She said she hoped I would be happy. I said I hoped she would tell the truth sooner next time, and then wished I hadn't said it. We still know each other's birthdays. We still know how each other takes coffee. Those details will never stop being true. They will just stop being useful. Sierra and I moved slowly on purpose. We didn't need to deserve it right away. Some nights we cooked with the lights low and let the cooktop hum, and we stood close enough to know what the other person might say and decided not to say it yet, because anticipation is a seasoning you shouldn't waste. Some nights we took the long way home past the bookstore with the velvet curtain and didn't go in. The city learned our pace and kept us in time. When I install that silent, sleek piece of glass in someone's kitchen now, they ask if it really catches everything. I tell them the truth I sell for a living, almost. The important things, yes. The rest takes honesty and a window. If they laugh, I know they're the kind of client who will stand barefoot at midnight and cook for someone they shouldn't, or should, depending on what they decide to call bravery. We call what we have a room with good light. We call it heat under glass and the decision to touch exactly where it matters and nowhere else. We call it precise. And at the end of the day, with the cameras gone and the city soft around us, she'll slide honey across my wrist just to watch my pulse answer back. And I'll kiss the place where sweetness becomes a story we can tell anywhere, even out loud, even here.